Hello, everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to our Fireside Chat with Peter Todd. He is the Dean of HEC Paris, one of Europe's leading business schools. Had been Dean of the business school at McGill University. And in fact, is the first Canadian, first non-French person to head up HEC Paris. Peter joined as Dean in July of 2015, so he's recently celebrated his 5th anniversary at the school and has been signed up to a second term as Dean. Peter, welcome.
Thanks, John. It's great to be with you.
So when you arrived back in July, what most impressed you about the school?
Well, when I first came to, I should say, a little over 5 years ago now, you arrive in a place with certain preconceived notions, and then you see what's really on the ground. I think the first thing that was, we say in French, frappant, but that really hit me when I arrived and started to talk to people was this sense of engagement that people had with the school. And it was the engagement of staff and faculty, certainly, of students, but of alumni as well. And there was this remarkable sense of involvement of alumni in the life and in their desire to push sort of the development of the school and the future of the school. It was something that was almost, I'm going to say, American in the way in the way they had this attachment to the school that I wasn't really expecting.
Huh. And it is one of and I think I'm using your term here from early on, one of the sacred institutions of France.
Yeah. Sometimes we say it's, I think in the French educational system, some people say it's a crown jewel, but it's a place that's very deeply rooted in long tradition, but one that has transformed itself into a global school. And I think that's part of the magic of the place today, the fact that, our campus outside of Paris brings students from, I think this year, 110 different countries onto the campus.
Right. And among the programs, you have a very large master's in management.
Yeah. That's the history of the school is that master's in management program that kind of grew up, I think, in France, has certainly well diffused across Europe, and from what I see is increasingly becoming kind of the European export to the world in some ways. We're seeing more and more of them in the US, certainly lots of them in Asia as well. And that remains kind of an anchor for the school, that Master in Management program. And it's certainly where we have our biggest enrollment of students.
Yeah, it's over 3,000 students, right?
Yeah, it's a big number. And today it's about 50% French students, 50% international students. They come, the French students, we get obviously the best of the best of the best who do the national examinations in France to come and join us. And we, out of the 10, 12,000 that write those exams, we pick off the first 400 or so a year. So it's, it's very, very selective, as selective or more selective in that sense than an Ivy League school. It might look more like an IIM in India with some of the numbers that we see. But yeah, we get the best there. And then now, we draw just fantastic students from all over the world, from some of the great universities of the world.
And Peter, since you've arrived, you've also grown the MBA program.
Yeah.
And so it's still intimate and very personal, and in some sense customized for people who enroll in it. What's your intake now, and what changes have you brought to the program?
So we take 2 intakes a year, one in September, one in January, and between the two, our target is to have 300 students coming in, and that's up from about 200, right around 200 when I arrived, and part of that idea was to get to a critical mass, to get enough students that it's not big and anonymous. It remains small and intimate, but there's enough mass there to attract global employers, and I think that was important, and I think we've achieved that. As the programs rolled out, I think we've added new specializations around sort of the 3 thematic areas that we push, to have a strong entrepreneurship track, to have a digital innovation track, to have a focus on social responsibility. woven some of the social responsibility questions into the general curriculum as well, so that that's there as an anchor with this notion today that we advance with all of our students around this idea of purposeful leadership, and so those things certainly have developed and shaped the curriculum. It remains a sort of a crossover program, if you want, one that attracts people who are looking to switch career orientations. It's a dominantly international program with students from China, from Asia, from South America, from North America, and from Europe, obviously. And I think that intimate, close-knit student experience, though, is something that characterizes what we do. As you know, we have a residential campus, and the fact that the students kind of go through that program living together remains a kind of key ingredient to what's special about HEC.
And of course, one of the most important aspects of the program is how international it is. I mean, you're drawing students from all over the world, and obviously a diverse group of students in terms of their industry background, gender, and everything else, the way diversity would be measured. Now, most of the European schools would call themselves global. Are you global with a French twist?
Well, I think the school is certainly global with a French twist. Now global means we're drawing students from all over the world. Look, in the MBA, we're 90+% now international students who come into the program. I think the French twist, and look, whether it's a French twist or a European twist, we can have many debates, but I think the French twist is that sort of focus in what we do, where the private sector and capitalism need to be situated in the context of broader society, and I think that's the flavor you get from our program, that there are things that happen in business and in the economy, but those things do have to be put in the context of broader questions in our society. And I think the diversity that exists inside the program also means that the students are constantly confronted with different ways of thinking, different perspectives, different value systems. And that's Europe as well, right? And its core. If you take the EU, you've got lots of different countries, different political structures, different values, different languages, different cultural histories, and so on. And I think that just gets amplified inside the program now that it's global in that sense.
And in a way, to be honest, I mean, that approach is something that has been embraced more by millennials and Gen Z generations, even in the United States, where, we are known for jungle capitalism.
Yeah, no, I think that notion that students are more concerned about climate, the planet, broader society, as we see generations of students grow, that's pretty clear that we see more and more of that. But there's there's kind of a depth to it here, that it's in the DNA in a real sense. This isn't a new topic. It's not a new initiative. If I look at, we're here today in the midst of this COVID crisis, and I often reflect that when I look at, for HEC, the journey on social responsibility, I mean, I think it's been there for a long time, but it really took a particular impetus after the last crisis, after the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, when we started to build as a school a lot of faculty capacity around it. And today, 150 faculty, and I think 40 plus who are doing research in this area as well. So that drives it very deeply into the fiber of the place.
Right. Now, Peter, if I were to ask your students what would be the 3 hallmarks of the MBA program, the 3 things that resonate most, that when they graduate, they look back on their experience and they say, wow, ooh la la, for those 3. What are they?
Look, I think the students, if you did a canvas of them, look, we all have our MBA structures with our programs, and there's lots of similarities to what we do in terms of curriculum content. I think they would say, first of all, this fact that they've gone through this experience in this residential environment together, and that they've learned so much from each other with that diversity that's in place is something that's fundamentally important to them. I think the notion that through the variety of specializations we allow them to follow, that they really get to discover and pursue new interests, and that's very consistent with these people who are looking to be a little bit career switchers as they come into the MBA. I think that that's another element that's really important. And I think the last thing that gets them comes back to the first thing that I saw, the power of the alumni network and their connection to that network that I think shows them how they can build and leverage on that network to be engaged going forward in their post-MBA experience.
Now, one of the big things that HSA does every year, and it's totally student-centric, is a sort of MBA Olympics. Which no one else really does. And you attract students from all over the world, from many, many different schools, who partake in this competition. It's a friendly competition, totally organized by the students, and therefore it's a great leadership opportunity and management opportunity, really, for the students to run it. And I would think that that's also one of the highlights.
Yeah, there's no question that in that notion of kind of community and experience that they have as they're going through, that's the thing that kind of marks the epoch for them as they go through the MBA program. And yeah, the fact that we have schools from all over Europe and increasingly now from around the world who come and join, and that we'll have 1,500, 2,000 MBA students across these different teams who come onto the campus in friendly and sometimes not so friendly competition, but certainly in good spirited competition. I think is something that kind of marks that idea that we are here in a community spirit, and we bring together for that event a broader and bigger community. And you're absolutely right. It's a great logistical and learning experience for the students. I think everyone who kind of participates in it comes out of it feeling, we really had something substantial, challenging to put together, and they come out of it, I think, also with these connections to all these people from all these different schools across Europe and around the world.
Right. Now, I know your instruction isn't English in your MBA program.
Yeah.
But do you think it's important for someone to be able to speak French to attend your school as an MBA?
No, to attend the school as an MBA, no. It's to absolutely leverage the experience of Paris and France and all that you can get from it, yes. And I think the key thing is for students who come, who say, I'm coming from elsewhere in the world and I want to maybe stay in France from a career point of view, it becomes important.
Yes.
It's still, the language of work is French, even in big companies here in Paris. Facility with the French language is still important, even if they do much of their work in English. So it's really for that segment of students that say, I'm coming with the idea of maybe staying and launching my career in Europe, perhaps in France, that it's important, and to get the best cultural experience. It's certainly useful.
Right. And HSA is not far from Paris, but is not in Paris. So
Correct.
While you have the joys of one of the world's greatest cities, it's not necessarily a distraction, right?
No, I think it's a little bit, the magic of the place. The campus is about 20 kilometers out of Paris, closer to Versailles than it is to the center of Paris. But it's that idea that the students are together on the campus that lets them develop. And what we see in our pattern, with our program that's sort of 16, 18 months long, is most students spend their core on the campus and really get to know each other and are in the program. And then when they get into the specialization phase, many of them move for that last 6 months into Paris to have the best of both worlds in some sense.
Right. That's awfully nice. So about the value of the MBA, there are a lot of people who think it's a very expensive degree. And there are a lot of young people who wonder, does it still have the same value as it once did? And is it still a worthwhile experience? I'm assuming that you are a true and total advocate of the degree and the education that it provides. But what's your sense of whether or not the value of the degree has actually been diminished in some way?
I think you have to think about the value of the degree, and I encourage every student who's thinking about doing an MBA or any other degree, think about what's your purpose in doing this degree and what are you trying to get out of it, and then matching yourself up, obviously, with the right school and the right environment, and sometimes at the right price. Look, what we see is we're a leader among European schools, certainly, and at the same time, if we look at the major competitors, even in Europe, never mind in the U.S., our price point is still relatively reasonable in an EMBA or in an MBA context. Sorry, at sort of running around 75,000 euros for the degree. What that provides on our side is very strong return on investment. If you look at the exit salaries of our students and you look at the salaries 3 and 5 years out, there's no question that economically it's a great proposition.
Yeah.
I think the notion, as in many great programs, that you're building a lifelong network and that there's this long-term return value, I think there's very little question that that's an excellent proposition in our case as well. So those kind of return values are very clear, and they're still very demonstrable, I think, for us in our program. Look, as I know they are for the top schools around the world.
I went back and looked at our interview with you shortly after you joined HEC, and you were asked if there was one thing you could change about business education, what would it be? And you basically said the obsession with compensation.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that?
Yeah, no, probably more than ever. And I mean, I come back to that notion. It's, when we talk about is it worth it, there's that idea of is it worth it from a return on investment point of view, which is very reasonable for MBA programs. But there's also that notion of, do I get what I want from this degree, and how does it change my life, and how does it change the way I interact? And I still think, when I look at rankings, when I look at all these different things, we're overly obsessed with money as the metric, as opposed to, have we really been able to say to those students, here's the experience, and do they really say at the end, I met my objectives? And it's fine if money's that objective, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But if they say, well, my objective was really to grow and develop in a certain way, and what we don't want, I think, is schools organizing themselves to say, look, because the rankings focus on the salaries, we're only going to take in certain profiles of students who go into certain kinds of jobs. I think that diminishes the MBA experience and the educational experience overall. And so I think we just have to continue to be true to purpose, in the sense that we're here to educate. Good things come from that. And we know that people who are well educated do better in the long run, but do better not just in terms of money, but do better in terms of their own lives and how their lives connect to society. I still believe that.
No, and
otherwise I wouldn't be an academic.
And the truth is compensation is the single most heavily weighted component in most rankings. Yeah. And that's problematic, because if you do funnel more people into finance and consulting, your numbers are going to be better, but the diversity of the school is going to suffer.
That's exactly right. And look, I think, we're at a moment in time where certainly we're always, at least among ourselves, right, talking about the rankings, and you guys are always interpreting and analyzing the rankings, and the guys who produce the rankings are always selling the rankings, and so on. But we're also, I think, at a moment in time where hopefully this crisis we're going through gives us a moment to have some deeper reflection on what should really be in these rankings. And many of us, I know when I talk to my colleagues, so could we get away from rankings and get into some kind of classification system that just says, these are great, globally elite schools. These are super strong national schools. These are great regional schools, and so on, that offer different kinds of students, different kinds of opportunities. I think we need to rethink these things, but there's a lot of persistence in these models.
Indeed. Obviously, we're going through a really unprecedented time. It's affected everyone everywhere in the world. How has HEC dealt with the pandemic?
Well, I won't say it's been simple and easy. It hits us at many different levels. It hits us obviously most acutely on the human level. We, like I think almost every school just about in the world, we could say, had to make our pivot last March towards online learning, and we finished out the last academic year dominantly through Zoom and allied technologies that our students worked with and our faculty worked with. I think the big surprises, but I heard similar things from everyone. The faculty were much more agile than we thought they would be in adapting, because we've always had this notion, as much as we push digital, the faculty are kind of the points of resistance. And in some ways, the students were a little less agile than I thought they might be in terms of adapting and adjusting. But that's something I think I hear when I talk to deans and colleagues at other schools, as well as presidents of other universities and so on. But we managed that, and I think what's striking to me, I just was with my dean of faculty who manages all the professors last week when we were talking about our teaching evaluations. We actually had pretty much record high teaching evaluations for the last academic year for all of our faculty, and that was consistent with kind of the feedback we were getting from students, that they were generally, at the end of the day, pretty pleased. Now, there may have been a little bit of, they gave us a little slack because they recognized the circumstance, but I think it also suggested people responded really well. We're starting a new academic year, and it's complicated. There's no question about it. We're a little bit behind the United States in terms of when students start, but we've started 3 weeks ago now. We started with our population largely on campus, but with a very hybrid kind of blended format of
Sure.
online and digital, with many more restrictions on behavior and opportunities to have fun on the campus as well. And look, all of that is challenging, and we continue to work through it. We continue to persevere. I think now we're starting to get focused on what are the lessons coming out of this, and what are the things that we can learn going forward. Digital transformation, pretty obvious, but also some of these questions of social responsibility, of inequality and equality issues that emerge when you're in these kinds of situations. And so in that sense too, it's giving us lots of food for thought.
I imagine there is a silver lining in all this. Part of it has to do probably with the acceleration of digital learning. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think that we're in a we can never go back situation almost. I think that what we're going to see is that we've gotten much better at figuring out how to blend the technology in with other types of teaching, and hopefully that will continue to drive innovation across the sector. I think across schools, and for us, as I say, we see professors doing things we didn't imagine before, and we also see, I mean, it's all anecdotal at this point, and one of my colleagues reminded me the other day that we really ought to be measuring more precisely the effects of some of these things, but I think so many of us are just trying to cope right now that that figuring out how to analyze in depth these things is important. But people have reported much more kind of intimate exchanges with students and groups of students, because they can work with them sometimes in small groups online that they can't do physically all the time. People talking about in sometimes much richer discussions in the class because of the combination of people being willing to discuss online and chat sessions blending together, ways to poll the students about how they're thinking about a topic that lead to other interesting discussions. And frankly, the fact that we can connect people from all around the world now. And we have today about 20% of our students who aren't here with us in Paris, who aren't here in France, who are following classes remotely. But it's also been the case we could bring in lots of speakers that we couldn't used to easily bring into class. And so there's lots of interesting, they're small innovations, right? But collectively, I think over time, they're going to have a big effect.
What advice would you have for a would-be applicant to the school's MBA program who is sitting in North America, India, China, can't get to the school to, feel, touch, and sense it, to figure out, okay, is this the right place for me?
I think those decisions are super personal for people to dig in and to find the right school. And I during the confinement, I spent time talking to a number of students, some people I knew who were thinking about applying to MBAs and not necessarily just ours, and kind of going through that process with them to say, you know, what are you looking for and how do you match up against, and what's the best way to understand that in this environment? Frankly, I think it's to get online with other students, and it's to be talking to the actual students in the program, and to be hearing about their experience. And so, I mean, we all do it, right, with our student sort of ambassador programs and so on. But I think that the need for that is multiplied in this environment we're in. But whenever I'm talking to students and when I'm talking to faculty, prospective hires, I say, well, truth comes from talking to your peers. And in some ways, because of the digital culture that's evolved, people are much more used to that, and people are much more accessible now in some ways with
True.
you know, with this modality. So for people in India, for people in China, for people in the US, you know, I think it's getting in connection with our admissions people, who I think are great at giving individual attention to students because of our relatively smaller size, who are then very apt at, I think, connecting those applicants with current students or recent alumni to explore. And those are the two things I think that give you the best flavor of, is this the place for me?
Yeah, good advice. Peter, before I let you go, I wonder what your plans are over the next 3 years. You were renewed for another 4-year term, and I'm wondering, you know, in front of you, what's on your agenda in terms of what you'd like to see change?
Well, you know, I think, as I say, we've been advancing these three major themes of, if you want, points of differentiation for us, of entrepreneurship, digital transformation, social responsibility. I don't claim in any way those themes are unique to us. There's lots of schools looking at all of those things. I think we've seen over the last 5 years or so, we've made big advancements in each one of those things. I think that whether that's, you know, new degree programs, joint with engineering schools and digital transformation, the opening of our big incubator in the center of Paris to really push entrepreneurship, the creation of our new purposeful leadership tracks in our program that are really around this social responsibility theme. I think the next challenge as we think about all that is how those three things connect together, and how, you know, when we talk about entrepreneurship, how you think about social entrepreneurship and how you tie that back to the social responsibility questions. As we think about digital transformation, how do those things drive what happens in entrepreneurship? And I think the next number of years is in some ways building the connections between those things, both in our research and then consequently in what we bring to the classroom and what we teach. And similarly, in the context of each of those three things, we often think we have to think, teach, and act. So think is the research dimension of that. Teach is obviously what we do in the programs, and act is how all that goes out and touches the broader society. And I think it's also how we string those things together in kind of a more profound way to really give our students and ourselves the opportunity to have more impact out in a broader community, in addition to the impact that we have from what we do in the classroom.
Right. Well, Peter, thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
John, thanks for the time. I really appreciate it.
Stay safe and healthy.
All right, you too. Take care.
All right, that's Peter Todd, the Dean of HEC Paris, or HEC Paris, if you don't want to pronounce it that way. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Thanks for watching our Fireside Chat.